Jewish Perceptions of the New Assertiveness of Religion in American Life, by Milton Himmelfarb. 1. In 1966 Commentary, published an article of mine titled Church and State, How High a Wall? It began, "The Jews are probably more devoted than anyone else in America to the separation of church and state. That is probably still so. The 1984 National Survey of American Jews, conducted for the American Jewish Committee by Stephen M. Cohen, showed American Jews to be ambivalent about some things but not about separation. Thus, in answer to one question in the questionnaire, 3 in 4 agreed that they supported such government programs as welfare and food stamps, while in answer to the very next question 2 in 3 agreed that such government programs as welfare and food stamps have had many bad effects on the very people they're supposed to help. The successiveness of the questions should have discouraged contradiction and ambivalence. Apparently it did not. Contrariwise, placing similar questions far apart could be expected to encourage forgetfulness, and therefore contradiction and ambivalence. With church-state issues that did not work. Most Americans are for tuition tax credits for parents of children in private or parochial schools. Question 3 asked about that, and question 41 about tuition tax credits for parents of children in Jewish day schools. Page 2. The answers to both questions were essentially identical. Of those having an opinion 2 to 1 against tuition tax credits, and only 1 in 11 or 12 not sure. Opposition to a moment of silent meditation each day in the public schools was even stronger, more than 3 to 1, with 1 in 11 not sure. In 1985, Cohen sent questionnaires to the same people who had answered the 1984 National Survey of American Jews and got more than 500 returns. One question was designed to test whether the attitudes of American Jews toward abortion are the same for the United States and for Israel or different. Turns out that they are much the same. About 4 in 5 were against both American and Israeli governmental prohibition of abortion, except in the case of rape, incest, or danger to the mother's life, 1 in 8 for the prohibition, and 1 in 10 or 12 unsure. On the other hand, there is a clear difference in response to teaching about religion in the public schools. About the United States, Jews oppose such teaching more than 3 to 1, while about Israel more, but fewer than half, favor than oppose it. Yes, no, not sure. Percent. U.S. 20, 70, 10. Israel 47, 38, 15. This last may be less inconsistent than it looks. Someone who is against teaching about religion in American public schools. Page 3. But for it in Israeli public schools might try to justify himself in some such way as this. In America children study English literature, in Israel they study Hebrew literature. Though the King James Version is an English literary classic, you can teach English literature without the Bible. You cannot very well teach Hebrew literature without the Bible. Note, however, that only about 1 in 4 said yes to teaching about religion in Israeli public schools, and no to teaching about religion in American schools. Further, that fully 3 in 8 American Jews oppose teaching about religion, even in Israeli public schools, shows a certain universalization of American values and practice. 2. From an American perspective, it is anomalous that most American Jews vote conspicuously to the left of their bank books, because other American religious and ethnic groups do not. From a worldwide Jewish perspective, it is not at all anomalous, because at least until recently that is how most Jews in Western countries have voted. What is the right perspective for viewing the strong separationism of most American Jews? If the alternative to separationism is thrown-in-alterism, then modern Jews everywhere are all separationists. Yet British Jews, and of late even some French Jews, find it hard to understand why American Jews are quite so intense in their dislike of such things as silent meditation or teaching about religion in the public schools. To which American Jews might answer that they have higher expectations of the United States than British Jews have of Great Britain or French Jews of France. Page 4. In the 1984 survey, 5 of 6 Jews agreed that the U.S. has offered Jews more opportunities and freedom than any other diaspora country. 1 in 16 disagreed, and 1 in 10 was not sure. How are we to understand the dominant attitude of American Jews toward, say, the moral majority? 1984. Impression of generally favorable, generally unfavorable, percent, mixed, no impression, ACLU, 42, 13, 24, 22, NAACP, 54, 12, 28, 6. Moral majority, 7, 69, 14, 10. Maybe our respondents answered in this way because they are Jews, maybe because on the whole they are educated Americans, and maybe because they are both. In 1984, only 1 in 6 had never been to college, 3 in 5 had graduated, and more had at least one graduate degree than the baccalaureate alone. About the moral majority, at any rate, the unpopularity to popularity ratio of 10 to 1 would probably not be greatly different in any respectable faculty club. Which is to say that to Jew, Jerry Falwell, the type, not the actual man, may look like Elmer Gantry as well as Torquemada. In 1985, Cohen tempted his respondents to do as some neoconservative intellectuals do, to think better of the Christian right on account of Israel. Since the Christian right has been very pro-Israel, American Jews should overlook their objections to the Christian right's ideas about America and work more closely with it to help Israel. Page 5. Though the wording took for granted Jewish objections to the Christians' rights ideas about America, few were mollified. Only a fifth agreed against the more than half who disagreed, and the more than a quarter who were unsure. Particularist considerations, help Israel, are not allowed to prevail over loyalty to liberal ideas about America, whether political or cultural. This loyalty, in turn, is itself not without a certain admixture of Jewish particularism. Liberalism has long been held to be not only good in itself, but also good for the Jews. 3. People use denial or evasion for dealing with conflict between one good and another. Dovishness is a liberal good. The 1985 questionnaire asked for agreement or disagreement with the proposition that major reductions in U.S. defense spending will weaken the security of the U.S. A clear majority disagreed. That is, those disagreeing exceeded the sum of those agreeing and those not sure. The contradictory desires for major reductions in defense spending and for national security are reconciled by denying that they are contradictory. Denial or evasion is also at work in American Jews' assessment of the effects of religion on society. Asked in 1984 whether they agreed or disagreed with the proposition that the decline of religion in American life has contributed to a decline in morality, the 6 in 7 who had an opinion divided about equally. Page 6. It may be that some of those who said they disagreed actually did agree but did not want to say so, for fear of giving aid and comfort to the moral majority. But the reasoning, if that is the right name for it, could also have gone the other way. The moral majority is wrong. The moral majority says that the decline of religion in American life has contributed to a decline in morality. Therefore, the decline of religion in American life has not contributed to a decline in morality. That is denial. Evasion could take this form. Decline of religion? What decline? The Christian right and those scary pro-lifers are evidence for a rise rather than a decline of religion. Decline in morality? If by morality you mean chastity, you are probably right, but morality is more than that. It also includes such things as tolerance and lack of prejudice. Since America is more tolerant and less prejudiced now than only a generation ago, you could as easily report a rise as a decline of morality. Besides, it is not as if we were against chastity. In the same survey, 3 in 4 agreed that adultery is wrong, against 1 in 6 disagreeing and 1 in 10 not sure. This recalls the old rabbinical, or is it generically clerical, joke about the letter that the hospitalized rabbi receives from the secretary of the congregation. Dear Rabbi, the trustees have instructed me to send you their best wishes for a speedy recovery by a vote of 5 to 4. Page 7. 4. After we dispose of the denial and evasion, we are still left with something serious that needs to be explained. The question about the decline of religion and morality is central. Put another way, it might be this: is religion a good thing or a bad thing for society? Not every religionist will say that it is necessarily a good thing. Though peace is presumably good and the sword bad, the scriptures of a great religion promise not peace but a sword. Nor will every secularist say that religion is a bad thing. For personally irreligious people like Emil Durkheim and Max Weber, the very asking about the goodness or badness of religion for society might well have seemed as foolish as asking about the goodness or badness of breathing. No life without breathing, no social life without religion. The very philosophes whose battle cry was, Ecris's Ellen fame, and who privately scoffed at the idea that their deistic deity had considerately provided an afterlife to mortal men and women, also were convinced that in order for society to endure, the masses must not be disabused of their belief in an afterlife of rewards and punishments. 5. Why then the even split between Jews agreeing and disagreeing about religious and moral decline in the United States? Let us imagine a Jew who is apprehensive about the new assertiveness of religion in American life. What might such a person say? He might start by saying that he was typical rather than untypical in being apprehensive about the new assertiveness of religion, of course, but also about nearly everything else. Page 8. A kind of free-floating anxiety is the American Jewish norm. The same people who in 1984 said that Jews as a minority fared better in the United States than anywhere else also, and at the same time denied by almost 5 to 4, with 1 in 7 or 8 not sure, that anti-Semitism in America is currently not in some all too possible future, not a serious problem for American Jews. At a time when Jews have been more successful than ever before, above all in politics, they deny by almost 2 to 1, with 1 in 9 not sure, that virtually all positions of influence in America are open to Jews. From the outside, American Jews must resemble the poor little rich girl. The apprehensiveness of us Jews is not altogether without locus or focus. Mostly we see unfriendliness, if not downright hostility, more among the rich and powerful than among the poor and powerless. We make an exception for blacks. In 1984, a little more than half of us thought most or many blacks anti-Semitic. About Republicans, 29% of us thought they were all or mostly anti-Semitic, about Democrats only 6%. About conservatives 35%, about liberals 7%. Averaging those anti-Semitism ratings, we arrive at something like a 15 or 20% anti-Semitism rating by Jews for all Americans, white Americans. In their secular capacity, in their religious Christian capacity, we think them more anti-Semitic than that. In 1984, 40% of us thought Catholics all or mostly anti-Semitic. Page 9. 42% mainstream Protestants, and 46% fundamentalist Protestants. In 1985, one of the questions asked about American Christians, American Jews, and Israelis was whether each of these groups was basically like me. Naturally, American Jews got the highest vote, more than 3/4. Next came Israelis with something less than half. Only a little more than a third considered American Christians to be basically like me. 6. And what is this talk about the new assertiveness of religion? The representative Jew is still talking. People speak not language in general but a language in particular, and they profess not religion in general but a religion in particular. It is not a new assertiveness of religion that makes Jews uneasy, it is the new assertiveness of Christianity, or of some movements and tendencies in Christianity. Nor is the assertiveness new. It is simply renewed. Some of us experienced it when we were young. Warner and Sroll's Social Systems of American Ethnic Groups, published in 1945, is about a New England city 10 years earlier. In the public schools, the Lord's Prayer was recited every morning. When the authors asked a Jewish boy what he did about it, he answered that he recited it too, because when in Rome do as the Romans do. When in America do as the Americans do. Americans recite the Lord's Prayer. Since it is a Christian prayer, the real Americans must be Christian. Page 10. Since it is not my prayer, I, the Jewish schoolboy, must be something other or less than a real American. Morris B. Abram, more conservative now than he used to be, still writes about how very uncomfortable he was as a child in the South Georgia public school system, really a Protestant operation supported by public funds, when the time came to recite the hymns and mumble the prayers. At the end of August 1985, a letter to the editor of the Washington Post protested the linkage or hyphen in Secretary of Education William Bennett's reference to America's Judeo-Christian heritage. It is almost as though the users of the phrase believe that Jews should not be critical of the user's religious agenda, as long as that agenda begins with the prefix Judeo. I grew up as a member of one of 3 Jewish families, in a town of 1,600 in northern New Jersey. Each day in public school we read from the Bible, said the Lord's Prayer and sang, Jesus loves me. To most of us, school prayer means the prayers of other people's faiths and re-emphasis of our status as a minority religion. To young American Jews in the bad old days, The assertiveness of religion in American life meant conformity, keeping a low profile, not making waves, prudence at the expense of self-respect. It fostered Jewish self-hate, the internalization of the other's image of Jews as alien and inferior. Page 11. Young Jews today have it better than their grandparents had when young, and one reason may be that the Lord's Prayer is no longer recited in public schools. We are not nostalgic about those days, and we doubt that some of the new asserters of religion in American life are equally lacking in nostalgia. In 1985, Senator Boschwitz of Minnesota sent to a Jewish list a fundraising letter on behalf of the 1986 re-election campaign of Senator Specter of Pennsylvania. Both are Republicans and both are Jews. Boschwitz's letter stressed Specter's part in the legislative fight against mandating or allowing prayer in the public schools, and urged his re-election for guarding the wall of separation against those who would breach it. The result in money raised was phenomenal, perhaps a record. 7. A penultimate word about Orthodox Jews. Qualitatively of great and growing importance in the American Jewish community, quantitatively they are a small minority, fewer than 10%. On the one hand, they generally are no less suspicious than other Jews of Christian intentions, though from a different angle, interreligious dialogue, for example. On the other hand, they are less separationist, if only from self-interest. Probably a majority, certainly a plurality, of the parents of children in Jewish day schools are Orthodox and resent the opposition of most other Jews to tuition tax credits. 8. My own views have changed little in the almost 20 years since that commentary article of mine. I have quoted its first sentence. Page 12. Its last sentence was Robert Frost's. Something there is that doesn't love a wall. To the position that has been dominant in the American Jewish community for the past 40 years or so, Naomi Cohen, in her encounter with emancipation, the German Jews in the United States 1830 to 1940, contrasts an earlier position. Jews usually meant a neutral to all religions, rather than a divorced from religion state. Indeed, the later concept was as abhorrent to Jews as it was to most Americans. Rabbis, long the most influential leaders of the community, taught that religion was a vital component of the good life and, like Christian clergymen, inveighed against the inroads of secularization. Lewis Marshall, the national spokesman of American Jews on the eve of World War I, found nothing intrinsically offensive about Bible reading in the public schools, so long as it did not become sectarian. New is not necessarily improved. September 1985.